So we're going to be looking at um, the healing of the blind, and so Matthew 9 mentions really as part of this trio of miracles here, because the last couple of weeks we've been looking at Matthew 9 in regard to the um, uh, um, Jairus's daughter being healed, which was she was then died and given life, and then we had your woman with the issue of blood, who was healed of an incurable and unclean thing, and so Jesus was demonstrating really authority over death and authority over uncleanness, and now he's dealing with these two blind individuals that we'll be looking at today, and then next week we'll be looking at the mute man that is healed. So really, in a lot of ways, what Jesus is doing is he is um, taking somebody who is involved with death and bringing life to them. Then he takes somebody who is blind and gives them light and understanding. And then with the mute man, who gives him the ability to speak, he is then giving them a testimony. So, but what I'm going to do today, because this particular story in Matthew 9 is not repeated in any of the other Gospels, there are other blind men to look at as well. So in Mark 8, there is a man that is blind and is brought to Jesus, and it's a strange little story, because Jesus has to work with him twice in order for him to get seeing properly. And then Matthew 20, Mark 10, and Luke 18 is all about the same individual, which is blind Bartimaeus, but he's only named as Bartimaeus in Mark 10. So we'll look at that particular story, and then we'll look briefly at John 9, which is the story about the man who was born blind from birth. And Jesus asked questions in all these things, and that's what I want to home in on today is these particular questions. So anyway, right, okay, so when Jesus departed, there two blind men followed him, crying out and saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he had come into the house, the blind man came to him, and Jesus said to him, do you believe that I'm able to do this? And they said to him, yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows it. But when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. So that's the story out of Matthew. We'll be coming back to all these stories, but I'm just going to read through each of them as we go here. So, and the next one is out of Mark 8, and this is the one where Jesus has to deal with him twice. Mark 8, verse 22, it says, when he came to Bethesda, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spat on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. But when he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. And then later on in Mark 10, this is this story about blind Bartimaeus, and we've talked about this story in the past, so those of you that heard this, just hang in there. Verse 46, it says, now they came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he had heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. then they called the blind man, saying to him, "Be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you." And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabboni," or Master, "that I may receive my sight." And then Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. And just the final story here. So this is going to be just the front end of John 9. John 9 in its entirety is about this blind man, so we won't take the time to read through all this, but we'll read the first 12 verses and then the last few verses of the chapter. So verse 1 says, "Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?' And Jesus answered, 'Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work, and as long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world.' When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and he said to him, 'Go wash in the pool of Siloam,' which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Therefore the neighbors of those who previously had seen that he was blind said, 'Is not this he who sat and begged?' And some said, 'It is he.' And others said, 'He is like him.' And he said, 'I am he.' Therefore they said to him, 'How were your eyes opened?' And he answered and said, 'A man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and I received sight." And then they said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." And just to look at the last few verses of that same chapter, it says, "Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, said to him, 'Do you believe in the Son of God?' And he answered and said, 'Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?' And Jesus said to him, 'You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you.' And then Jesus said, 'Lord, I believe.' And he worshiped him." So what I want to do here is go back to these various stories and start kind of breaking down within the story how the people approach Jesus, what Jesus does in terms of his interaction with them, and the question that Jesus poses. And because I think there's a lot of mileage in these particular questions that Jesus asks, because it's the same kind of stuff we can ask ourselves and we can ask other people in terms of pastoral care and evangelism and that kind of thing. So we'll just again look at Matthew chapter 9. So and what I'm going to do is have in yellow or orange, however you perceive that on the screen, is what the people do. I'll have in blue what the question is, and then I'll have in green what Jesus is doing. So and then we'll just sort of recap some of these things in regard to the questions at the end. So but I find, again, as we've been looking through these particular miracles and stories, just discovering who the characters are and what's going on, for me, it really has opened up these stories quite a lot, and they're to me exciting stories. And so anyway, so in verse 27 it says, "When Jesus departed from there, two blind men followed him, crying out and saying." So as you can see there in the orange, they're doing three things. They're following after Jesus, and now it's not because of what they can see, obviously. It is because of what they can hear. They hear the crowd, and they hear a lot of hustle and bustle, and things happening, and so they want to then be part of this and follow him. So and then they cry out, and so they're not just trying to follow Jesus just out of a thing of curiosity. This is an opportunity to get themselves sorted out. Now, the thing I find interesting about a lot of these blind men that we encounter is that they are end up asking things of Jesus that will really change the course of their life, because the fact that they're begging, um, obviously they can't work, so they have to receive monetary sustenance and food and so on, and even um emotional sort of shoring up. Because when somebody was in that particular state back then, they needed to know that they were okay, probably. So they needed people to come along and sit with them and talk with them and give them some kind of emotional support. So it was probably in a lot of ways lacking, because people, a lot of people then wouldn't have sort of cared and that kind of thing. But they knew and probably understood that Jesus did care about people, and so they saw this as a great opportunity to say, look, we're prepared to have our lives changed, and changed in a very significant way. So so they cry out, and then they make this statement and say, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now we'll see that this is true of Bartimaeus as well, but to say the Son of David, have mercy on us, Son of David is a messianic term. It is a phrase, because we know that what was understood about Jesus. Now we know that he's the Son of God, and that his stepfather was Joseph. And as Philip would have said in John chapter 1, we found the Messiah, the son of Joseph. And now we know from the scriptures that Joseph was only Christ's stepfather, but so that's what he probably would have been known as, is the son of Joseph. But to call him the son of David, that is a reference to David, the second king of Israel, who was probably the best king that Israel ever had. And so, and the promise of the Messiah would be coming through the line of David. So, and the genealogies in Matthew and Luke make that quite clear, that Jesus has a claim to that line and a claim to that throne, because of the genealogy and lineage that is there. So, and so for a man to say that he is the son of David is to basically say Jesus is the Messiah. He is the promised one. He is the one that is going to save their people from their sins, as the angel had proclaimed to Joseph. So, and they knew that they needed mercy, because mercy is something that is exercised on people who have great need. So, so they acknowledged Christ in his divinity, and they also acknowledged Christ in his mission on having mercy on people. So they want that mercy to be shown to them quite personally. So, and then when you move to the next verse, we then get into a few bits and pieces here that are in different colors. It says, "And when he had come into the house." Now, I like sort of stopping and looking at these different phrases, because it just opens it up in terms of what's visually going on, but the importance of why Jesus was doing what he was doing. Unlike say Bartimaeus, who was on the road to Jericho, we'll see here in a moment. And Bartimaeus was healed on the road, and he followed Jesus on the road. It says here that when he had come into the house. So now, providing that this particular miracle is in Capernaum, um, and it was in the house where, say, Jesus was staying, these men were brought into a place, and so now don't know whether it was Peter's house, another house, or the house of where the blind men may have resided, or something like this. But it is getting away from the crowd and coming into a private space. And I think that's the point here, is that Jesus wants to meet with people in a private space, because he just like he did with Jairus's daughter, he had to put away all the unbelief and outside, and only have those that believe on the inside. So Jesus comes into this house, and then the blind man come to him in this place. So I would think, just looking at that, it was probably not the blind man's house, but it was probably the house in which Jesus was staying. Some commentators would say that if this was Capernaum, this was probably Peter's house or something like that. So, but nonetheless, the blind men then came to him. So they made they weren't waiting for Jesus to drop in their lap here. They came to him. And so then Jesus asked this question, which we have in blue. It says, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" And I think that's a really a desperately important question to ask of ourselves in our various sorts of circumstances, and to consider for other people as well. Because I remember there was a guy in my home church there in Baltimore who was part of our support group, getting help. He was from an alcohol background and so on, and but he tended to want to continue on with the lifestyle that was associated with drink. Now he knew that drink was doing him damage, but he liked the karaoke. He liked the lifestyle. He liked the being around those particular people. And I remember that we asked him, "Do you believe that God is able to deliver you from your problems of addiction and moving on in life?" And he says, "Yes, but I don't believe He'll do it for me." And that was because that he wanted to continue in that particular lifestyle, and that's what he ended up doing. He not only went back to drinking, but he went on to cocaine and a bunch of other things, and that was because he just was not really prepared to trust God with his life and with this new lifestyle that Christ in a lot of ways was demanding. So because when you come to Christ, things change. So Christ is asking this very, very acute question: "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" And so what they say then is, "Yes, Lord." And so now this is going to bring about a big shift in their whole mode of operation, because it means they're going to have to go to work, and they're going to have to start fending for themselves in a sense, and legitimizing their existence and so on. So things are going to change quite dramatically. But I think in a lot of situations with our own lives, it could be in regard to could be in regard to work. It could be in regard to a financial situation. It could be in regard to people within your own home. It could be your own physical or medical situation that you have, and Christ is asking you, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this? Do you believe that I'm able to bring you from the place where you are to a new place, and that place is better. That place, you'll be able to perceive and understand, because that's what the whole thing about uh, being blind is about. When you're blind, you cannot perceive. You cannot obviously see. It's your ability to understand stuff is limited because there's a lot of information that you're not getting. Now you may have hearing, you have ability to touch and to taste and these kinds of things, and you are able to understand certain things, but having sight um, is something that really opens up the world to you. So Jesus, when he's dealing with blind people, he realizes that, and we need to realize as well, is that we're spiritually blind and blind to truth. And what God wants to show us is he wants to take the blinkers off and show us what the truth is in him, so that we can then walk in a way that is pleasing to God and will then benefit the kingdom of God. So the next verse here is then what Jesus does, and he says then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be to you." And so Jesus, when he's asking this question, is he's saying, "Do you believe?" And so they say yes, and then it is according to their faith that it happens. So, but Jesus gets personally involved by touching their eyes. Now, Jesus didn't have to do that. Jesus could have just spoke to them. Jesus could have, waved his hand over their head or something like this. But, here he actually gets engaged and puts his very hands on their eyes, which is a very, very personal thing. I mean, when the pandemic is finished with and we're able to get together and shake each other's hands, we're not going to be touching each other's faces unless we sort of know each other very, very well or something like that. So Jesus is getting very personal and intimate with these men and saying, I'm going to touch their eyes, and then makes this statement, according to your faith let it be to you. So and their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows it. But when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. Now, you can understand the excitement that the men have about this. And but again, the reason that Jesus was sternly warning them, see that no one knows it, is it's their own personal miracle, and Jesus doesn't want to be seen just as a curiosity or a miracle worker, because Jesus came to deal with people's spiritual needs, really first and foremost, and that was the problem with their sin. Because if they only had physical problems dealt with, they could still end up going to hell and not have their sins forgiven. So I think it was, Jesus, giving them an opportunity to say, look, I want you to not go buck mad here. Just, look at what I've done for you, and look at not only the physicality of it, but also the spiritual aspect of it, and just start getting on with life and trusting God. But the problem is that they then disobeyed, and when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. And that really, in a sense, sort of hampered Christ's ability, in sort of physical terms of being able to get around and do things, because, every time he was then seen, everybody was like, running for just the physical things, like what Jesus said in terms of, I think it was John 6. He says, you didn't come because of you saw the miracles. You came because you were fed the loaves and were filled. They just had a need met. And but it wasn't because they had seen a miracle and then believed in Christ as the Messiah. So everything was going swimmingly here up to the middle of verse 30. And then things went a bit south. Now it didn't it didn't wreck their the fact that they started to see and all that kind of stuff. But it is just a kind of an interesting thing. So now, as we get into Mark here, this is the story about this man that had to be touched twice by Christ. And it says in verse 22, when they came to Bethsaida, which is at the top of the Sea of Galilee. It's on the northern side. And if you're looking at Lough Neagh, and Lough Neagh, again, is roughly the same size as the Sea of Galilee, as we've looked at before. And Bethsaida is right up there at the top, so it's right about where Toome Bridge is. So if you're next time you're driving through Toome on your way to Derry Stroke City or whatever you want to call it, and you're driving through Toome, just think, okay, this is where Bethsaida is on the Sea of Galilee. So, and Bethsaida means house of fish. Beth is the Hebrew word for house, and Saida is the word for fish. And so it is the house of fish, and there was basically a port up there where there's a lot of fishing boats and so on. But but the thing is that the thing about this particular blind man is that it is not he himself that comes to Christ. He is brought to Christ by they. Okay, so they is a group of people that know this man and bring him along. And so it is they that then beg him to touch Christ. So I don't know if this man has any great expectation or great desire at this particular stage to be healed, but maybe these particular people see it as an opportunity to get this man sorted out. Maybe he's a pain in the back end, because of his begging and that kind of thing, and so they want Christ to go and deal with them, get him out of the road. So there could be all kinds of different reasons for why this blind man is brought, but nonetheless, it is they that do this. It's other people. It's not the blind man himself. But what Jesus then does with this man in verse 23, it says, and he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of town. So I think the reason that Jesus is doing this is that, again, it's about being intimately involved, but it is leading the guy out of town, out of what he knows, out of what is understood by him. Because, people back then who begged and were blind or, however they operated, they would know their area very, very well. They would know every rock to sit on. They would know pretty much everybody that is passing by and working, and who says hello to them and who gives them money and all these kinds of things. And sometimes Jesus needs to lead us out of town and take us by the hand to do that. I remember when I was my first missionary trip back in 1982 was to go to Portugal for nearly 6 weeks with a team from my church, and I traveled from Baltimore on a flight to New York Kennedy Airport, which is a huge airport. Every airline has its own terminal. When you go to Belfast International Airport, there's one terminal, and all the airlines all have a little stand, which you can go and get checked in and that kind of thing. But in Kennedy Airport, every airline has its own building, so it's a huge place. And so I got had to change planes and change airlines, and so I went and got on an Air Portugal flight that left then from Kennedy, and then went overnight to Lisbon. I was going to say Lisburn there. I'm not going to Lisburn yet. Lisbon in Portugal, and I remember sitting next to a woman who basically hounded me the entire time over, saying, why are you, going to Portugal to tell people about Jesus? That's stupid, And and I found out that this woman was Jewish at the end of that flight, and then I understood why she was giving me such a hard time. But it was absolutely a dreadful flight because this older woman was just saying, so. But once I landed, I didn't know very much Portuguese. In fact, I knew hardly any at all. And this was the first time I was ever in a foreign land. And I traveled there by myself, and I had to change planes again in Lisbon to then catch a flight to Porto, which is in the northern part of Portugal. And I had no idea what to do or where to go or how to be. So I just went up to a guard and I showed the man my ticket, and then he took me by the hand. This guard, here I was, 16 years old, and he takes me by the hand and he leads me to my gate, and because I didn't know where to go, I didn't know what to do, and so I got to my gate. And he indicated to me, even though he didn't know any English, I didn't know any Portuguese. He just looked at me and gave me a nod and said, this is where you're supposed to be. And so I got on that flight, and then it was nice when I got to Porto to see the missionary that I did know, and he picked me up at the airport. So so it's it just reminds me of that whole situation where Jesus then takes the blind man by the hand and leads him out of town and takes him to a place that is unfamiliar. And then what Jesus does is he spat on his eyes and put his hands on them. Again, a very personal sort of thing. It's not, and that would be maybe the kind of thing that a mother might do with their children who have a dirty face or something like that. She might if there's no water around, you might spit in a cloth and then wipe the child's face, with your own spit and that kind of stuff, but you wouldn't do that to somebody else's kid, and you wouldn't do that to a stranger. But when Jesus gets to comes to us, he knows us, and we belong to him. And so he deals with us as his children. So he spat in his eyes and put his hands on him. And then he asked the question there. Now it's not it's not in the form of a question, but it says here, he asked him if he saw anything. Now, if you look at the ESV or the NIV, some of the other translations, it does say Jesus, asked him, "What do you see?" So it does, depend on what sort of Greek manuscript and such that you'd be looking at, because those other translations use sort of other Greek texts, but it's not violating anything. It's all basically saying the same thing, and but I find that this question is interesting. Basically, it's saying, what do you understand? How do you see things in your life? Because Jesus knows that this man was brought by other people. So what was the expectations of this man? And so this is what the guy says. He looked up and said, "I see men like trees walking." Now, that's a very strange thing, to say that men are like trees and they're walking around, So what I gather from this, and it's for this man to be able to say, "I see men," that means he understands something of what he sees, and then he's comparing them to trees. So that means he understands what trees are. So this man wasn't born blind. This was a man who may have become blind later on in life, and I think the man had understood things in a warped way, because I think his vision was probably impaired from the word go. So it was fuzzy stuff. It was um, confusing stuff, and he was probably told those are men over there. Well, but they look a bit like trees, and because he was told probably about trees too, and so when you see things in a blurry kind of way, a man might look a bit like a stick, with his arms sticking out, and that to him looked a bit like the same thing as a tree, a blurry vertical bit with sticky out bits and all this kind of stuff, but they happen to be moving around. Um, so I think because of the man's uh, idea of what things should have looked like. This is the point of reference that this man has, is that he sees men like trees walking. So basically, he's getting back to the expectation and the understanding of what it is to see. So, but this is where Jesus then says, right, he puts his hands on his eyes again. And so this is the only time that you see this in the Bible where Jesus has to touch a man again. And I think a lot of this stems from the man's expectations. So, and his expectation of being able to see was only to get back to what he understood about those things. So, but Jesus puts his hands on his eyes again, and then made him look up. So it's making the man look and actually then see things. And as it says here, and he was restored and saw everyone clearly. So Jesus does something that is complete. Now Jesus could have done this from the word start. He could have healed the man completely from the word go, but I think he wanted to take this man on a bit of a journey here and say, right, since you're not the guy that came to me directly, you were brought to me, and these other people begged me to touch you and so on, how do you see things? How do you perceive things? How do you understand things in life? But then when we really come to know Christ, then Christ will say, all right, I'm going to make you look up again, and then we can see everyone clearly. So and then there's a similar kind of thing here about what we had in the other stories, is when he sent him away to the house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell anyone in the town. So he again said, look, this is your personal thing. So go away to your house and get on with it. Now, the story about Bartimaeus here in Mark 10, and this is a story that's mentioned in Matthew 20. Now, it does talk about two men in Matthew 20. It's sort of like the way Matthew talked about the two men that were demon possessed, in the Gadara, whereas the other Gospels talk about the one man and that kind of thing. So, I think Matthew is probably looking at a totality of people. Whereas Mark and Luke are much more fixated on individuals. So now they came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. So just to again give you a bit of context of what's going on here, Jesus was likely on some kind of a pilgrimage that took him from Jerusalem down toward past Jericho, down toward the Jordan River, and then they would then go back. And so if you look at Luke chapter 18, where this story is mentioned, they're on their way down, and then chapter 19, where Zacchaeus gets dealt with on that same road, it's on the way back. So anyway, it's it was known to be a time of pilgrimage and going back up to Jerusalem and that kind of thing. So he's with his disciples, big crowd. Blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. Now, I always found this whole thing about Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a little bit strange, because Bartimaeus in Aramaic, which is related to Hebrew, means son of Timaeus. So it's a bit sort of like they're given a bit of a translation here, like so blind Bartimaeus, that's but in Aramaic that means son of Timaeus. So they're saying, son of Timaeus, the son of Timaeus is almost like repeating himself. But Bartimaeus in Aramaic means one thing, but the son of Timaeus is actually a Greek rendering there. That means something completely different. So blind Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus means the son of Timaeus. So Bar is son, and Timaeus means a defiled or dirty man. Now, can you imagine being called that? I'm the son of a dirty man, and I'm blind. And that really does sort of show the depth of sin and where people are. And so it's interesting where this starts, as he's talking about, look, I'm blind and I'm son of a dirty man. But the son of Timaeus, as it says there, Timaeus in Greek actually means somebody who is highly prized. And so, here we're just seeing a little bit of a statement from the Bible that says, look, here's blind Bartimaeus, who starts out as a blind man that is defiled. And then when he gets healed, the end of this journey is that he is the son of somebody who is highly prized and highly desirable. And that is exactly where God wants to take us. He wants to take us from being blind and being dirty and being the son of a dirty man, to being the son of somebody who is then highly prized. So, and that's what Jesus does for us. That is the relationship that Jesus brings us from and brings us to. So anyway, he's sitting by the road begging. So in verse 47 it says, and when he heard that it was Jesus, or Jesus of Nazareth, which that statement in and of itself is demonstrating that Jesus is from a part of the world that may have been regarded as because Nathaniel said in chapter 1 of John, he says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And so Nazareth wasn't noted for great things. But nonetheless, he hears of Jesus of Nazareth. He cries out and he says, "Son of David, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." It's very, very similar to what happened in Mark 9, but it's a different situation, different people. And then you have people that then come along and warn him to be quiet. So in other words, stick a sock in it, shut up. We don't want to hear you. And but he cries out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This man is not going to be made quiet. He is going to cry out and until something happens. And I think that's what sometimes we need to do with Christ. It's that old thing of push. Pray until something happens. So, but this is what Jesus does, verse 49. So Jesus stood still. And I find this absolutely remarkable, that the cry of a person causes Jesus, who is the King of glory, the one who made all things, who has eternity in his hand. The cry of this man, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, causes Jesus to stand still. And so, our cry to God, in our time of need, will cause Christ to stand still and to stop and to have his attention captured. And and then what Jesus does is he commands him to be called. And so it's not suggesting him to be called up. He commands it. This is Jesus showing authority, because Jesus is not going, well, it'd be nice if you came, or if you want to come on up. When Jesus stands still and captures your attention, he says, look, you, you've got me now, so now you're coming. So and then he calls the blind man, says to him, be of good cheer. Or they called the blind man. So this is the crowd again, saying to him, be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. So happy days. And then what he does in verse 50, again, these are all statements about what the man does. It says he throws aside his garment. And in the Greek, basically that means that he chucked it, the garment, as far as he could throw it, because he knew that whatever Jesus was going to do, he wouldn't need this garment anymore. This was a garment that would make him look a little worse for wear, so that people were a bit more exercised, a bit more pity toward him. So he knows he doesn't need this anymore. He doesn't know what Jesus is going to do. Jesus hasn't healed him yet, but he follows Jesus' voice. And so he throws aside his garment, he rises, he comes to Jesus, and then Jesus asks him this question here in the blue: what do you want me to do for you? And so, and I think that's, again, an important question to field, because Jesus wants to know, not that he doesn't know, but he wants, you to hear yourself say it. What do you want me to do? What is your expectation? This is quite different from the other story here, because Bartimaeus is his expectation is much higher than your guy that was asked about what he saw, and he saw men like trees walking. So so I remember asking a woman one time who came to me for help with a drink problem, and I asked her, so what do you want me to do for you? And she says, I want you to stop my drinking, I want you to stop my smoking, and I want you to get my kids back for me. Now I couldn't deliver on any of those things, but at least I knew what she wanted. So sometimes, this is a good question to ask, because, the guy could have said, well, Jesus, what I need for you to do is to get me a loaf of bread and a pint of milk down from the spar, and a packet of fags or something, and that would suit me. And I think if that's how the man would have answered, I think Jesus would have said, well, there's plenty of people giving you money, so go work away. But what the man does respond with is he says Rabboni, meaning master. So this is, remember when we talked about rabbi, and Rabboni. Rabboni was the master. Rabboni was the best of the best, and so that means master. That I may receive my sight. And so not only is he looking to see, but he is looking to also understand what he sees. He needs to perceive. So, and then the end of the story is when Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well, and immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. So really the only reasonable response here from the man is to follow Christ on the road. So and Jesus is rewarding faith here again. So there's a lot of stuff here about, do you believe that I'm able to do this? They say, yes, Lord. That was the first story, and here in this third story, go your way. Your faith has made you well. So and there is an immediacy to this, and the only reasonable response really is to follow Jesus. So now the last story here in John 9. Now the crack here with John in the 9th chapter. It's a big long chapter about this blind man. He was blind from birth. The disciples asked him, who sinned, is him or his parents, And Jesus says neither him or his parents sinned, but that the glory of God may be made manifest. And so Jesus tells this man to do something, and he does this thing. Goes and washes himself in the pool of Siloam, and then there's this whole say-ho about, is it the guy? Is it not the guy? And he's asked, what about this Jesus, and who is he, and all this sort of stuff. And so later on in the chapter, he says, whether Jesus is a sinner or not, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that once I was blind and now I see. There was bona fide change. That's what he gathered. So and the man ended up being put out of the temple there because they were perceiving him to be basically saying that Jesus was the Messiah by what he was saying to them, and they didn't want to hear it, so they fired him out the door. So here we have verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him. Now, again, these are wonderful words. When Jesus hears that there's really a bad thing that has taken place to this particular individual because he did take a stand in regard to what he understood, Jesus goes and finds him, and then asks him this question: do you believe in the Son of God? Because at the end of the day, this is what this is about. Do you believe in Jesus, the Savior, being the Son of God, who has a right to your life? And so very soul-searching, deep question. And does this question just impact a certain aspect of your life, or does it impact the entirety of your life? So what the man answered is, he says, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" He wants to believe in Christ, and but he's unsure or doesn't know, what the identity of Jesus really is. And so he says, well, who is he, that I may believe in him? And so Jesus then gives this brilliant answer. He says, you have both seen him, which is tying in with the fact that he was healed from his blindness. And so blindness, again, is what sin does to a person. And it is he who is talking with you. So Jesus, the Messiah, the King of creation, the one who is the Lord, is being seen by this man, and it is he, Jesus, who is communicating with him personally. Can you imagine what it's like for this man, that the first thing that he really sees and understands is him who made him? And so what a wonderful first image, because when Jesus gives sight to the blind, he not only gives them the ability to see, but he gives them the ability to understand what they see. Because if you've never seen before, and you all of a sudden get your sight, then you have no reference point in terms of what you're looking at. So because you can't understand something that has no reference. So but what Jesus does when he heals is he then gives reference points, and then the ability to understand what you're seeing. So Jesus sees him as the one who has healed him, and but also the one who is talking with him. In other words, this is going to be Jesus who's going to continue to engage with him from here on out. And then he says, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. And and that's what it all boils down to: is, Lord, I believe. And then you worship, you get down on your face before Christ, and you acknowledge him as Lord and Master and God of all things. So just to recap these questions, and then we'll sort of park it here. is the first question was, do you believe that I'm able to do this? And I just have in purple there the word believe, because it's seems to be a common thing. But really it has to do with Jesus' authority to do. Jesus, when he asked this question, do you believe that I am able to do this? This is about, do you believe and understand that Jesus has authority to do uh, uh, things in your life that you can't do? Um, and then the other question was, he asked him if he saw anything. And what this is about is the perception of reality. And how do you see things in life? Do you see things as men, like trees walking, which is a distorted view, or do you see things with restoration and with clarity, which is what happened when the man was touched again by Christ? Then the third question is, what do you want me to do for you? And have here with a question mark, agenda. Do you have an agenda in terms of how you want Jesus to deal with you? Or are you just coming to Jesus with your need and going, Jesus, I don't know how you're going to deal with me, but whatever you're going to do is going to be absolutely superb. Because sometimes you can come to Jesus and say, Jesus, this is my problem, and since I'm talking to you, this is how I want you to sort it out. And but Jesus is really not interested in your prescription or your agenda, because your idea of how you want your life to be sorted out may not be the best way. So, but oftentimes that's what we come with, and and that's okay. But you need to be prepared that Jesus may come along and say, "See your agenda and see what you want." That's not the best thing for you. So and so there may be an adjustment for what you're asking. And then the last question here is, do you believe in the Son of God? And so here it's talking about worship. And it says in the Gospel of John in chapter 4, when Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, he says, the Father seeks such to worship him. The God the Father is a seeker of worshipers, and and it's not that God is some sort of sadistic God, or somebody who's selfish or something like that. God is the farthest thing from being selfish in terms of desiring worship. Because the Lord God of heaven has given us absolutely everything in order to have relationship with us. And so to the point where he's given us his son, the Lord Jesus Christ, that he might die and experience damnation, where God would then, the Father would then forsake his own son. And really the only reasonable response to any of that is to, like what Bartimaeus did, follow Jesus on the road, and like the boy did in John 9, he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. So that's those things today. Apologize for going on a little bit longer than normal, but anyway, so for next time we will be looking at just this man who is mute, that Jesus then heals, and I think we'll probably try to squeeze in the last chapter, or the last bit of the chapter there for next week, and see where we go. So, but anyway, you know how this flies. Sometimes we don't get much further than a verse, but anyway, so and so that will be that. So here we go. I will. Anybody want to ask a question, you can wave and I'll unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. So, okay. Right, Bobby.
Really, see in John 9 and verse 4,
Yep.
Jesus said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The
Yep.
night cometh when no man can work. What exactly did Jesus mean by that? By, not be able to work at night? Was it a reference to something else?
Well, I think it's talking about when he was here on the earth. You know what? Verse 4 here. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day, and the night is coming when no one can work. So, while he was in the world, there he was the the demonstration of the Father, in that time, and so he, as it says here, why, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world, and so where his work is going to be done and its completion is here in the earth. So but then there's going to be a time when nobody can work, when there's work can't be accomplished. So
there's no light.
Yeah. So I think there's probably a lot more to that. I didn't necessarily come prepared to sort of delving into that particular statement. I'm sure that because that's a big story. That whole thing in John 9's a huge thing. So
Sure.
an awful lot going on there. You could probably spend near a year just trolling through it.
Thanks, Willie. And really, you see the part where it says where Jesus had to actually work with the man twice. There's another reference there where he actually touched him. See, now, as we know, he could have restored their sight by just saying it,
Yeah.
But the fact that he touched them, do you think that was to maybe enhance their faith? Do you think he maybe doubted their faith? And he thought that maybe if he touched them, that would give them more.
Well, it is interesting how Jesus, deals with different people different ways.
Yeah.
And what I see in it is that Jesus is getting very, very personally involved, and because they are blind, touch is an extremely important factor, of how this works, because, Jesus could have talked to him, but he may have perceived Jesus then talking to somebody else, and so because you don't know, when you're blind, you don't, you hear a lot of stuff flying about you, and it could be aimed at you, it may not be aimed at you. So, but Jesus is then taking his own hands and touching the man and saying, "Look, I'm giving you my undivided attention here, and this is me," So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't actually thought of it that way before, really, to be honest. Thanks, really.
Okay.
Certainly explains.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to get Eilish pulled up here. All right. Eilish, you'll have, oh, there you go. Yep.
Whenever.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying there about blind people and not touching, could it be that the people around them thought they were cursed by God, so even to go near them, it would be wrong, you'd want to keep away from them because God has already cursed them?
Yeah, yes, I think that's very true. When people had ailments of various sorts of descriptions, they if you touched them, that was a bad place to go, especially if you're a leper, as we saw. If you touch a leper, you were bound to get leprosy, So, yeah. So I think one of the problems with being or having blindness too was the way it was had come about. The old dusty roads down there would have created a situation where people, because of animals, defecating and all that kind of stuff, the dust matter would have caused going up into your eyes and all that kind of stuff. And that would have created a situation where people would have gone blind. We probably have heard, about children and stuff like that messing about with, dog dirt and that kind of thing, and then they're rubbing their eyes and then they go blind, because there's a bug that goes along with that kind of thing. So it would have been the same kind of situation, in those days, so there probably was a lot of issues of, blindness taking place, and it was just seen as a dirty thing, so no. Yeah, I don't have the video on, so anyway, yeah, I think that hopefully will answer your question there.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, I just needed to turn off my video there. If you were wondering, I was talking and then didn't. All you heard was a voice, so it's kind of like the blind man, so. Okay. Okay, Martin, you're gonna have to unmute yourself there.
Unmuted.
You're
Woody ain't going to be a bit of a snob here.
right.
I have my final exam on Monday.
Yes.
I'm studying.
Yeah.
And
Yes. You're looking very academic there.
yes, indeed. And I'm studying about the healing ministries and the synoptic gospels.
Yep.
And sometimes